everybody, and happy Thanksgiving. If you celebrate Thanksgiving, it is Turkey Day, and that means it is time for the first annual Turkey Day special of SFF180. Hey everybody, TMW here with my little pilgrim Wink. I hope you have been having a really good holiday if you celebrate the holidays, and here I hope to bring you a little bit of levity amidst all the turkey and dressing and cranberry stuff and all that. So, tell you what, let this little silly person go out and play, and let's talk a bit about a really strange book called Galaxy 666. Alright, now if like me you have devoted your life to the glorious hobby of reading, you know that you are going to come across books in your lifetime that exist along a vast spectrum of quality, right? You're going to have these magnificent, glorious books that change your whole life, and then you're going to read some pretty good books, and then you're going to read some so-so books, and some not-so-good books, and some really lousy books. But then, every once in a while, you're going to come across something that exists in a strange, alternate realm all its own. Well, for me, one of those books is a little thing called Galaxy 666. This is a book by a fellow calling himself Torro, as we will soon see. That is not his actual name. This book was recommended to me by a reader, actually. Someone on Twitter recommended it. I was in a funny mood at one point and was looking for recommendations from readers for bad books. I was just in that frame of mind. And even though I didn't choose that one, I was intrigued by the recommendation, because I'd never heard of it. But the internet being what it is, I was very quickly able to find out about it and obtain a copy, and oh my golly, what the adventure it was. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about Torro. Well, as I said earlier, that was not the author's real name, of course. His real name is Lionel Fanthorpe. He's still alive, even though this book was written many, many years ago. He has a website. He is an Anglican minister, and on his site, he sort of reveals himself to be, for all intents and purposes, he seems to be a cheerful, kind of avuncular fellow, probably a really great guy to sit around and talk to. He's written extensively on some really oddball topics like UFOs and Forteanism, but you get the impression reading Galaxy 666 that he's probably in on his own joke, and that helps you to kind of appreciate, perhaps, where a little creation like this might have originated. Okay, now the imprint that this was originally published under in the UK was something called Badger Books. Now let me give you writers a little bit of a pro tip. If your publisher is this kind of Skid Row outfit who have chosen for their name something that is a common mammal that alliterates to books, you are probably not being ushered into the world of literature through the VIP entrance. Now, the only reason Galaxy 666 is remembered at all these days is because it is, I think, one of the very few books, perhaps the only book, that Fanthorpe wrote as Torro that got released in the US. Its imprint over here was a sleazy little house called Tower Books, who published all these cheapo sex novels and what have you. I'd actually love to dig some of these up and read them based on what I have found out about them. I'm sure they'd be hilarious. But anyway, here is how Badger Books kind of did its business. It had in its possession a collection of cover art, right? It just had these stockpiles of art. Have no idea where they got them. Whether or not they actually had legal rights to do anything at all with them is probably up in the air. But what they would do is they would contract writers and they would say, write a story to fit this cover art, okay? Now, that's actually not unlike the circumstances under which a legendary film producer named Val Lewton worked when he was doing B pictures at RKO Studios back in the 1940s. RKO Studios would give Val Lewton very cheesy-sounding titles like Cat People and I Walked with a Zombie. But Val Lewton was something of a creative genius, and he would take those terrible titles and he would craft masterful little suspense films around them. That's what you can do when you're a creative genius. It's not what you do when you're a guy like Lionel Fanthorpe writing as Torro. Now, the cover that I am showing here is on the US Tower Books edition. You see this fake little Starship Enterprise right there. I have a feeling Tower didn't really necessarily run that past their legal department. I further suspect that they didn't have a legal department to run it past. So anyway, if you want to find this awesome thing, you can get it through abebooks.com. That's how I got it. What's it all about? Well, it's kind of like this. You see, I'm kind of having a bit of trouble formulating the plot, such as it is, because there's really not a plot. This is one of those books where things just happen, and then they continue happening, and then at a certain point they stop happening. That point usually being defined by the word count that the writer was given that he had to meet. And one of the things that's really, really funny about Galaxy 666 is that even though it is a wafer-thin book at 138 pages, Fanthorpe is still padding the thing ruthlessly. He will have characters talk and talk and talk for pages on end. They'll start usually ostensibly addressing a certain subject that might be plot relevant, but then they will go off on these wild kind of brainless pseudo-quasi-philosophical tangents, and then they'll ask each other meaningless rhetorical questions, and then they'll dither a bit, and then after about 2 or 3 pages of this, they'll get back to whatever it was they were talking about in the first place, as if it mattered in the first place. But anyway, everything starts out with these 2 guys, Ishkla and Korzak. Now, this is set in the future, because science fiction, right? So these guys are like computer dudes, right? They're computer technicians and programmers, I suppose. This was written back in the days when computers were kind of exotic things that were the size of milk vans, right? So anyway, they're fiddling around on their computer and they're studying this astronomical body that they call Galaxy 666. Now, first off, what you realize is that Fanthorpe is a little bit confused on the difference between a galaxy, right, big swirly thing with lots of stars, and a solar system, which is 1 star and some planets and asteroids and stuff, right? So what they're actually studying is a solar system, but they call it Galaxy 666, so we're not exactly scoring big points for scientific literacy here. This isn't Arthur C. Clarke. Okay, so these guys are studying Galaxy 666, and it's very confusing to them, because it's getting strange readings. The computer can't seem to figure Galaxy 666 out, because it's a very weird body. It makes no sense. In fact, the information it's getting is so varied and so contradictory that there is no possible gestalt of any kind which the computer can detect. You know, just to give you an idea of the deathless prose that's at work here. Seriously, right off the bat, you get a wonderful idea of what you're in for when you encounter a dialogue exchange 3 pages in that goes like this. The 2 old men shuffled off along the visitors' gallery until they reached the bar. Now, said the first, "Tell me, my friend, you looked very surprised at the mention of Galaxy 666. What's the matter with it?" "Everything's the matter with it," answered Bion. "Have you ever been?" asked Milka. Bion nodded. "Yes," he said, "and I wish by the 7 green moons of Gongle that I hadn't." "Well, that's a strong oath for a spaceman to use," said Milka. "By the 7 green moons of Gongle," repeated Bion. "Tell me about it," invited Milka. Yay, this is already one of my favorite books. That's great! That's one of the best passages ever! Okay, so obviously since the computer's really stupid, it's probably running Windows 8, and it can't figure Galaxy 666 out, the only thing to do, obviously, is fly to the place, right? I mean, it's the future, we have spaceships, let's go, and they go. So somehow they get in touch with somebody named Captain Bronet, or Bronet, and he has a pilot named Oski, and they get aboard a spaceship, and they fly to the place, and then they land on a planet that Fanthorpe describes as apocryphal, although how a planet can be apocryphal, I'm not exactly sure. But check this out. Here is how he describes the planet's surface itself. There were pinkish streaks among the rock, and it seemed that some of the chromatic tint from the atmosphere owed its origin to these. There were a number of white veins in the rock which bore some kind of resemblance to marble, but the majority of it was gray. It gave an overall impression of grayness streaked with pink and white, rather than an overall impression of whiteness tinged with gray and pink, or an overall impression of pink streaked with gray and white. I'm sorry, what the hell color was the rock again? I didn't get that. Seriously, I've read that passage about 20 times now. After all of that, I still have no idea what freaking color the rock is. Okay, so how do things play out at this point until we get to page 136? Well, some gelatinous aliens land on the planet. Who knows where they came from or why they turned up there. They kidnap Captain Bronet and our computer guys and spirit them away aboard their spaceship. And Captain Bronet, deciding that he doesn't quite like this treatment, breaks loose and he beats up the aliens and he takes control of their spaceship. And then he decides, since Galaxy 666 represents all that is insane in an otherwise rational and orderly universe, well then the way to deal with whatever the situation is, I'm still not exactly sure what kind of threat this place is posing, he decides what he has to do is go temporarily insane, and then they will be able to break free from the pull of Galaxy 666 and get home. And that's what he does. He just goes insane for a little while. I had no idea you could do this. I had no idea sanity was this thing that you could just flip on and on like a light switch. Well, I need to go insane until I take care of some problems, so I'll do that for 20 minutes. There, all better now, back to sanity. How very handy. So they finally break loose of the galaxy's pull, and the gelatinous aliens say, hey, we're sorry, we were such douchebags, we have no idea why we did that. And Captain Bernays says no harm done, and the aliens drop them off on a nearby planet, and then Captain Bernays and the scientists hitch a ride home, and the end. No, really, that's it, the end. Hey, if you guys think you can top that one, please, by all means, send me the recommendation. Maybe it'll make it on next year's Turkey Day special. But until then, thanks for joining me today. Hope you had a good laugh. If you really, really want to read that book, you can get it. And otherwise, have a great time with your families. Have a safe journey if you are traveling at all this holiday. Enjoy your leftover turkey and stuffing and dressing and cranberry stuff and whatever else you have. And until I see you next time, happy reading!